every year.
There's a total disconnect now between the ruling group and the masses.
I hate psychology.
Clear out.
They're the same worm-like characters.
Analysts.
Fuck you with your stupid argument.
They should not bother us.
Democracy. All of this just works.
Vote for the generations who are coming.
Fully dynamic game engine.
A millennial video essayist.
Always support strength
Constant craving.
and identity.
I haven't yearned. They are a disease of our time.
Clear them out. You're voting for what your grandfather and father fought for.
I sit and yearn.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, the weekly show for the most sensible of centrists. And today we have a bit of a grab bag of articles and news, etc. I have been away for a little while, and so we've been joined by one of our constant companions to talk a bit about what's going on in the world, maybe touch a bit on NATO, etc., etc. As always, my co-host Ludwig Path is here. How are you doing?
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much. Good morning, I guess, to some of you, and good evening to the rest of you. This time it's me who's congested. I thought I had gotten away scot-free, but the weekend after the last Longhouse, I caught the flu again. So again, apologies to the listeners. And then I guess we can introduce Leo Borealis. How are you doing, sir?
Good evening. Well, I'm doing quite well. So it's red meat afternoon for us then, or red meat morning for our American viewers or listeners. Or
certainly, yeah. No, I feel great now. I've spent just under a week abroad in the mountains, so the fresh air has done me good. I don't have any problems with congestion now. Let's see here. Okay. Someone is requesting more cowbell. No, Bowden in the in the intro. I think I'm going to add more cowbell now.
Yeah.
I'm going to update it and make more cowbell.
Ding, ding,
You will
ding.
regret this day, Mister. Forever and ever. The intro will
It's a
just be
moose
cowbells.
in there.
Nordan asks, why are you guys so sickly? Well, I think I just got unlucky. And Ludwig Path is a father,
Daycare.
which means that, yeah.
Yeah.
His kids are
He's-
constantly making him sick. So let's see here.
So where did you go on tour then?
I've been in the Alps, actually. I've been skiing for about a week, which was fun and probably gay.
Downhill or
Yeah, downhill skiing.
Oh no. That's
Oh,
not
that's-
aristocratic, my
no.
friend.
Very
I know it's
metrosexual to do
I know
downhill
it's
skiing.
not. I know.
Very bourgeois.
Yeah.
Very bourgeois.
Did you buy any chocolate then? Since you were in the
No, I
Swiss
did
Alps.
not, because we went to actually at some point we crossed over to Switzerland, but we did go to Italy. So it was on the Italian side of the Alps. But at one point you could cross over into Switzerland. So yes, technically I was in Switzerland for like a day, right? But not enough
at least
to buy
you
any
went
chocolate or
in
anything like that.
Switzerland and accidentally strayed over into France.
Oh no. I did get to see the mountain. Is it Matterhorn? Is that what it's called? It's the one on the chocolate.
Yeah, it's Matterhorn.
Yeah, I think it's the one they put on the Toblerone or something.
Mm.
That was
something
nice.
Like that.
You're not
Yeah.
allowed to, go anywhere near it, but
Why
Yeah.
not? Are you
I mean, I
afraid
guess you
someone's gonna
could in
steal
theory.
it?
In theory, I guess you could if you just load it up on. But I shouldn't have because already, over the weekend I was there. Like a family of like 6 went missing in the mountains because there was so much snow and fog. So we got a bit unlucky in terms of the weather.
Did you
Oh,
do any
okay.
off-piste skiing?
A little bit. But I was a bit rusty in my technique, so I had to spend some time sort of just trying to get back on the horse, as it were. So
I see.
nice. All
Yeah,
right. Well,
I was actually out hiking, but the disaster struck halfway. My fucking so the soles on my boots actually, so by the heel on the left side, it ripped open. So as I kept
oh,
going in like hilly and on all the rocks in that rough terrain, it came off like more and more and more. And by the time I had made it back to the car, it was just the insole in the like the threads that are sewn through the
oh yeah.
the bottom thick leather sole and the rubber sole. So it's just like clapping against on the other side of the foot. And I was sliding around on it like on a small ski. It was just and you start walking like really weird, and especially
Yeah.
when you're walking uphill on rocks and one foot is slipping all the way. So
Oh, that sounds horrible.
my right wrist was just so fucking sore.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right, let's bring on some of the. We usually try to, whenever we do our episodes, we try to start off with something a bit more fun and interesting. What we call sort of the red meat articles that sort of get you people in the chat in the mood, as it were. And this week is no different. And we'll start first with an article from a local newspaper here in Norway, which is called "The Fight for Israel," which is about the 40-year-old man Bjarte, I guess if I anglify it, who quit his job at the local newspaper to work on something that he believes is more important. Nowadays, he trawls the Norwegian media looking for errors in the Israel coverage. In a kitchen in Vennesla, at an address we're not allowed to give out, Bjarte sits and reads news reports from NTB, which is basically Associated Press in Norway. He says that he can hardly bear to follow the NRK, which is state media, think BBC, anymore, and he has taken a break. Nor does the Associated Press leave him in a particularly good mood. Very often they write that Israel, quote, claims something, while the health authorities in Gaza's, quote, say. But the health authorities in Gaza are Hamas. So why don't they say outright that this is Hamas who's communicating? It seems to me that they're whitewashing Hamas, says Bielos, when the paper meets him at a cafe in Hunsøya where the interview is taking place. He has a piece of jewelry around his neck that says in Hebrew and English that the hostages must be allowed to come home. As he himself sees it, he is one of quite few Norwegians who still care about the hostages in Gaza. Nordanon asks, does it do it for free? Bro became a professional fact checker. We'll see. I'm not sure. To be honest, I haven't read all of this article. I got about halfway and then I thought about it. And then I figured, I'm going to have to share this with you guys. Let's see here. I have not yet seen any Norwegian celebrities standing around with a poster demanding that these hostages be set free, he says. 7 years ago, he was a journalist in a local newspaper, and before that, he worked at Fedlandsvennen, another paper, among others. He wrote about zoning plans, schools, and other regulars in local newspaper journalism. I got a bit tired about writing about bazaars and local events, he says. He was much more engaged when he wrote in the comments section of VG, another paper, under articles about Israel and Palestine. He grew up in a home with deep skepticism for Israel and Palestine. My parents went to Israel a lot in the 80s, and I heard many positive stories from that country. But in the newscast, there was only negativity. It didn't match with what I got at home. After I visited the country myself, I saw that it was very different from what you would get the impression of. I felt that there was a great injustice in what happened. For 7 years, this father of the family, let me just double check here. Yeah, okay, this family father has worked for the organization With Israel for Peace. So he works for an organization called With Israel for Peace. It's a pro-Israel organization with 1,400 members in Norway. Every day, he reads the largest Israeli media in search of news that can increase the readership of the organization's website. But what really generates clicks is when he, in his articles, claim or say that the Norwegian media is wrong about Israel. Part of my driving force is that I feel that much of what is said and written turns out to be wrong. What is missing in the debate are Israel's arguments. When the Norwegian media interviews someone on Israel's side, it's usually someone who's very radical on the left or someone who's very radical on the right. It's very rare that Israeli consensus emerges. How do you feel about this, Letting Path?
Just a minute. There we go. Well, there are a lot of people like this. I'm seeing comments here. They're talking about like, is this guy Jewish? Just to sum up a bit of this situation
he
in
look
Norway,
very
he
Jewish.
is not. I can almost guarantee you that there are very few Jews in Norway. Where he is living, probably close to zero. They have no reason to be there, no interest in being there. But Israel-Palestine foreign policy commentary is a national pastime in Norway, and I think it has been so for a very, very long time. I mean, a bit historical. Norway's been ruled by the Labour Party for a very long time, and with the establishment of Israel, they had connections to like the Norwegian labor unions, basically, that are kind of the beating heart of the Labour Party. And so there were relations between like the labor unions and the American kind of Jewish labor unions in the beginning, when Israel was thought of as much more of a socialist project. I mean, over time, I think those relations soured, and the Norwegian
Certainly,
left
yeah.
kind of fell out of favor with Israel, and kind of it became sort of more pro-Palestine, and we're very explicitly pro-Palestine later. That has, I think, it's much more to do with this idealistic foreign policy perspective, where it's really all about human rights and human rights abuses and apartheid. It's the standard kind of shitlib stuff that you read in the paper. Whereas on the right, you have a lot of guys like this who are sort of more either center right or further conservative, and they will sympathize with Orthodox Jews. Typically, that's very, very typical. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of guys like this, and of course, the older you get, the more there are of them. They are a kind of dying breed, but that's true, I think, for most of the West in terms of the sort of Israel, Israeli Defense Force kind of stuff. I mean, we've talked about the conservatives. I mean, I'm not talking about the center-right party in Norway, but the kind of the hardline Christian. They used to be called like the Christian Party. Now there's sort of this fringe, more kind of Christian conservative party, right? I mean, we talked about Erik Selle. That is the you can see like the president and the head of that party, and he's this sort of nomad who has spent his entire life proselytizing for Israel in Africa, right? Yeah, I mean he's literally. We talked about this. He's won awards, right, in Israel for his contributions.
He's won. I mean, I'm not even like playing this up. He's won like the top Goy award. He's won one of those top non-Jewish contributors to Jewish causes awards.
Oh yeah, and he's not Jewish himself. So it is everything from like the center right, more business, like pragmatically oriented people, onto the more kind of Christian, Protestant fundamentalist right that support him. Even I think the Norwegian Democrats are pro Israel in Norway. So I mean, it's not a good look. I think you have to go on to like the super duper cuckoo right with the alliance and stuff before you get to this kind of unironic paganism and anti-Israel sentiment. If they're, for such a thing, I mean, we've covered this in other points. I'm getting a bit off track here, but I'm just saying that this it seems funny, but it's not an uncommon type of person here who will sit and just argue in comment sections on Norwegian newspapers for Israel's right to exist, because it's just become like this red blue. It's almost like a football thing,
It is.
where
And this guy's,
yeah.
getting paid to be a quarterback, right? So he mentions a small victory. In October, the Associated Press wrote an article that the border between Gaza and Egypt had been closed since 2005. After half an hour, they had changed it to mostly closed. The border crossings are an important issue for an organization that believes the claim that Gaza is a prison is not true. Bjarte wrote an article about fake news at Associated Press and that the border crossing actually had been open most days in 2022. In fact, a total of 245. The fact checkers at the website faktisk.no, which is basically like the Politico equivalent here in Norway, took a closer look at the matter and concluded that the number 245 was correct. At the same time, they wrote that the Palestinians are not allowed to cross the border freely. The long article shows how complicated such questions can be. He says, the point is that if NRK and others know that someone is watching them, they might not be able to make that mistake again. It is not primarily to take over the NRK, but to ensure that it doesn't happen again. So he's keeping state media accountable when they're talking about Israel.
Fact checked by true Norwegian patriots.
Even if you accept the premise that there are many errors in the reporting, surely the core of the criticism is that Israel's attacks lead to far too many civilian casualties, the reporter asks. No one denies that there is great civil suffering. What we are disagreeing about is who is responsible for them. Many believe that it is Israel that is responsible, but we believe that it's primarily Hamas that is responsible. They were the ones who went to war against Israel, and no one would have been killed in Gaza if that hadn't happened. That's a rough one, considering the history and how Israel has been acting against, the population in Gaza. It's one of those, like, we're not killing you, we're sort of just letting you die, kind of thing.
Yeah. Of course, it's not something that I really want to get too much into, not because I'm not interested, but really in sort of the spirit of refocusing the lens here away from the Middle East, which I think that's sort of the future for all, even for the transatlantic countries, to just those people are going to be left alone to deal with their own problems very soon.
Yes. Okay, and he talks a bit about the war, etc. It's not that interesting. Let's see here. The day before the interview with the paper, Bjarte has been on a Christian TV channel talking about Israel. In a few days, he will be speaking at a meeting in Grimstad. He knows the Norwegian Friends of Israel better than most. This is a organization. An Israeli friend compared supporting Israel to having a good friend who does a lot of stupid things, but who you still defend publicly. Is it a useful comparison to understand the organization Norwegian Friends of Israel? Asks the reporter. Well, the others have to answer for themselves, and for my own part, it is the case that when I hear about something Israel has done, there's a spinal reflex that makes me ask, is this true? And often it turns out that it isn't. What some friends of Israel claim in the debate is not always true either, and he can confirm that himself. We moderate and we try to rebuke politely, and we delete comments from both sides on our website. All right, this isn't very interesting anymore.
Just a question, Leo. Is this the same for Sweden? Do you have this kind of thing as a pastime there?
I would say no, not really. It's different here. Since we had all the leftist, the Palestine groups, and it's the 1968 lefties, the boomers, were generally communist and all, and Maoists and all of that, and were that then, and they started all those political groups. As a result of that means that the kind of the default of the quote unquote right wing commentariat in Sweden then must be Israel friendly, because then they can, every time the Palestinians do something let's call it morally reprehensible, then they can use that as a bat to swing at their political enemies. So I don't think it's like really done by people in this manner, that it's like, normies. It's more like political commentary at people who might have, as you say, business people and stuff like that. So it's more instrumental. It's not really that, it doesn't really come from an organic place. It's more like this is something that we can use. It's not really about feeling that Israel is something special or something like that. I mean, sure, there might be a true believer here and there, but from what I can see, most people just don't give a fuck.
How about the Jewish population in Sweden?
Well, it's very small. It's more like the situation is kind of like in Norway. I mean, there are some here and there in the
Do they have
bigger cities.
do they have chartered planes at standby, at the ready to be able to ship Israelis back to their home country because of how hostile it's become here? Remember, that's something that has been said in a podcast that we've talked about, Letting Path.
No, I don't think so. I mean, there has been some whining and kvetching in the press when this whole thing kicked off, but that was like gone after a week, because then it had no news value anymore, and people, just shut up. No, I mean, what is it, like 18,000 Jews in Sweden, something like that, and most of them just live in Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö. So.
It sounds very familiar. Is that it's kind of there, but you don't have this kind of pastime thing where that's something that everyone cares about. And I mean, in Norway, it's not just that like the general public cares about it, but the people who work in foreign policy also seem to care a lot about that. I mean, so much of Norwegian.
I think it just goes back to like the Oslo Accord. I mean, there's this prestige project that's just, it's kind of our thing and it's failing, so we have to cover it, right? We have to talk about it.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we did use the a little bit of, but I think that's more of a boomer thing. But the boomers have kind of grown out of it. It's just more of a reflexive thing of, the old propaganda. We kind of helped the Jews, with the white buses and stuff like that from Germany and stuff like that during or after the war, really. But I think that, the Zoomers don't know about it and they don't care. And everybody who's not a boomer and is just, just remotely interested about the Second World War and just have scratched the surface, really quite realize that, yeah, this was kind of a PR thing to, get some brownie points with the Americans, because, we weren't really on the Allied side of the war until 1945.
Yeah.
So there was some horse trading going around, and, that's more like the official propaganda thing. But even then, I mean, you rarely see a Swedish politician use that kind of in any sort of rhetoric, because they know that it can if someone actually wants to challenge them on it, it can quite easily be dismantled. And also, it's not a thing, really, to the Israel thing. I mean, sure, the Social Democrats were of course infested with the Palestine groups and stuff like that. So the Swedish political establishment has in some ways always kind of been anti-Israel and not really Jew friendly to the Jewish people, but more like there's almost none of them here, and it doesn't matter. Yeah, more or less, it's a position of indifference. And on the national political side and on the international side, it's been kind of usually officially against Israel and with the Palestinians. But on the business side, but not too much to harm the business side of things, because it's more like we sell a lot of shit to Israel. So,
So before we move on here, I just mentioned that in the final article, he manages to slide in a reference to the 1930s, pay his dues, as it were, which is good. I have another article about Jewish women being blocked out from the Women's March this year. Do we want to do that, or should we just go on to
Yeah, no, I think
other stuff?
that's a little bit interesting to take a look at. I was looking at my Twitter timeline, and I've
Yeah, let's do that.
started to follow some Norwegian populist characters, and this was brought up. So I haven't really read the article. I don't know what it's about, but I'd love to be enlightened. Just the general sentiment now is that Ma Women's March is all about the Palestine now. So
Yeah, I mean,
the
it's
last years.
the Venn diagrams are starting to overlap, right?
I mean, earlier it's been, oh no, my women's march has been about the transgenders, and so we want good old conservative feminism, but now it's been kind of captured by the Palestine stuff, and because you're sort of
Yeah, they should be
nominally,
marching about birth control and stuff. That's
yeah, or
not this
Israel, I
stuff.
guess, would have been good as
Or
well. I don't
Israel.
think they would have complained as much.
Yeah. So
Just
this
like
is an opinion
yeah.
piece, but it details the things that happen. So I'm just going to start reading, and you can just interrupt me. All right. This year's 8th of March celebration has had a sad and unnecessary aftermath. March 8th is the International Women's Day. It was the International Women's Day. It was unfortunately still necessary and important to highlight this day. Women fight for very basic human rights in countries such as Afghanistan and Iran. But women also fear for their rights in many other countries, including the United States, where the right to self-determined abortion is being threatened. Even in Norway, one of the world's most equal countries, or equitable countries, there is still a lot to address. This particularly applies to violence against women. The number of R words in Norway is increasing alarmingly. So far this year, a number of women have been killed by their partners and family members. This year's main slogan on the 8th of March in Oslo was therefore very relevant, both nationally and internationally. Not a single, not one more, I think it's just not a single one. Stop men's femicide. Is this a weird translation? No, that's pretty much it. Stop the femicide of women. It is extra sad to note that the commemoration in Oslo ended in an undignified and inflamed conflict. A group of Jewish women were blocked from joining the procession with their placards. One of the slogans bore the inscription #MeToo unless you are a Jew. Another showed photos of the Israeli hostages captured in the October 7 terrorist attack. The women had received permission from the organizer to participate under a parole against the use of sexual violence as a weapon. According to the police, they were physically prevented by other participants in the procession. Is this the male feminists who were?
This is
who were
very
bravely-
interesting.
Like, who were the people who prevented them? Like, physically prevented these women from attending. The 8th of March committee has.
Let me get the whole thing straight here. So they had the signs. The Jewish women showed up with the hostages on placards or something. Is this correct?
Yes. The Jewish feminists showed up with the placards. They had been granted permission by the organizer of the procession that they were going there under the, as I said, under the parole of being against the use of sexual violence as a weapon in war.
By
right? That was
Palestinians, I guess. Yeah.
Well, but
I guess, yeah, maybe the male feminists, or maybe it's like they have, brown women, I guess. Because just in terms of numbers, I think if this is in Oslo, then, the Palestinians are people adjacent to that area. Maybe they come from Egypt or Iran or something. They probably outnumber them quite a bit. And the coalition, as we've talked about, like the left coalition is so staunchly pro-Palestine. It's almost kind of inseparable. That's the thing with these political coalitions. It's very hard to just go into the logic brain and say that this is about women and women's rights only, and you can't talk about this or that. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like other women who who are stopping them. Actually, does it go into detail about this?
Probably. We'll see. I don't think so. The committee, blah, blah, blah. The committee has subsequently claimed that the women were aggressive. So watch out, guys. The women are aggressive. The committee also said that some of the posters were not acceptable because there were female soldiers among the hostages, and because, quote, many people perceived it as an accusation of anti-Semitism. The reasoning is both vague and unreasonable. The committee knew that this group of women would participate in the procession. The handling of the situation is beyond reproach. There was obviously a great potential for conflict. The organizers should have had a better plan to handle the challenges both before, during, and after the celebration. The police eventually had to intervene and stand in a protective ring around the small group of Jewish women. It was a shocking picture. The committee for the 8th of March tells Votland, which is a paper, that Women's Day is, quote, a political celebration, not a public celebration. This is about rights. The organizer is free to exclude any women they do not wish to include. But if the marking becomes too exclusionary, it's in danger of making itself irrelevant. All women, regardless of background, should be able to feel safe at a March 8 event. The organizers should learn from this incident and ensure that this never happens again.
I don't even know
So,
who organizes this stuff here.
Probably, let's see here. Check who is doing this. It's a committee. Let's see here. About this committee. So,
Communists?
it sounds like it.
I'm shocked
This is
and
being very
appalled.
vague. This is very vague. I'm on their websites. Yeah, there's some overlap with labor and people from the Palestine lobby, people from women's rights groups, people from the Reds party, like the actual communists, the socialist left, the labor front. So yeah, it's literally communists.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's no surprises there. If you look at the newspaper contributions from it's more kind of Norwegian left-leaning journalists and people who are active in politics, the general tone is that they want Norwegian boycott of Israel, kind of regardless of regardless of what the international community wants. They just want Norway to stand out and just sanction them. They called for basically like excluding them from Eurovision before that actually happened. I mean, just so people don't get things confused, because Israel has been excluded from the coming Eurovision Song Contest because they insisted on kind of doing the same thing they're doing here, right? They're trying to make it about them, and I think the Eurovision Song Contest has explicit rules against political songs or anything that's sort of explicitly political. So they sort of excluded themselves by trying to make it about them. But before that happened, there were very clear calls to just have them shut out of that contest just on account of what's going on with Israel and Palestine currently. So I mean, I kind of like I said, if those people ran the country, we would have just had like a full boycott of Israel already. So I think they were sort of just ready to push them out as soon as they saw the signs, like as soon as the friend enemy distinction, as you say, became clear. They were.
What do you mean? What do you mean, Luddick? The Israelites do, making everything about them? They would never.
It's very shocking. I did not expect. I did not expect
It's
from them.
unexpected behavior. What made them do this? Who made them do this?
Yeah, no, it's a typical. It just repeats itself over again. But well, that's the way it is here. I mean, it is something to take into account, I think, for people who are watching, because if we have many international viewers, I think most of our viewers are not even Norwegian. But I mean, of course, it's important to pay attention to the, let's just say, the Jewish community and what's going on there and the influence that they have. But like, you have a tendency, you see it on Twitter, on YouTube, this kind of J-brainedness around these topics, like especially among the Groypers and some of these other subgroups of the terminally online right, that it's like it just comes down to who's Jewish and just pointing the finger. You're Jewish and whatever, and like every single discussion is going to come down to 5 degrees of separation, who has like one Jewish ancestor or something. It's sometimes it doesn't explain everything. That's just what I'm saying. If you look at some of the countries in the Nordics where like the Jewish presence is almost non-existent, and you're still dealing with a lot of the same bullshit leftism, the kind of bullshit ideology and so on. Like it can't exclusively be explained by subversion.
No, I mean but I think that is also an American thing because but
I was trying
concur,
to find the
they've really gone
tweet
overboard
now.
with it. It's like the one drop rule almost. It's just ridiculous.
Yes. I was trying to find there's one of these tweets. I think is it like an old Landshark tweet or something, with like the difference between the American right on Twitter and the American right online and the European right online, with some the Groyper man. He names them on Twitter and he says he points out the heritage, and the European right is just sharing old articles from Julius Evola and talking about some black metal guy talking about slitting his wrists.
Yeah, it seems very accurate.
It's it just caught my attention that the meme came true, so to speak. I have one more sort of rage bait article before we talk about anything remotely serious. How do you guys feel about doing one more? How does the chat feel about doing one more?
I think we are about a half an hour in, so if we're going to have time to... if Leo wants to do the red meat, then maybe I'm outnumbered, but I just thought in the interest of time compression, we could move on to the main topic.
We'll have to, regardless, I think we're going to have to try to get you back on, Leo, and get Burkhall as well and do a real deep dive on the NATO stuff at some point, and conscription, things like that. But one person, 2 people in the chat are already opted for the rage, so the pigs yearn for the trough, Luddic Path. We're going to have to give it to them.
Sex sells, but anger sells better.
I concede to the populist this time.
So this is an article about an 18-year-old woman who, or I guess she's like maybe 20 or something now, that lost both of her parents growing up and decided at the age of 18 to go over to Denmark to get artificially inseminated and have a child on her own. So she was 7 years old when her mother dies of a brain tumor. 10 years later, her father takes his own life. Left behind is Leen Paulsen. She's always envisioned creating her own family, but now that she's alone, the desire is stronger than ever. She's 18 years old and single, but she won't wait any longer to fulfill her dream. I always wanted to have children, and I learned that life can be short, so I didn't want to wait. When both my parents were gone, I thought the time had come, she says. She's also Danish, by the way. Let's see here. In Denmark, as in Norway, assisted reproduction for single women is permitted. Paulsen believes that her decision to have children on her own was thoroughly thought out. Her closest friend challenged her by asking questions and making the then 18-year-old consider and weigh all aspects of the decision. Who's the friend? two 18-year-old girls talking about something that's we're gonna get to the truth. And that's not even a sexist comment. I mean, two 18-year-olds, anything is generally a bad idea. I wanted to do everything that so that it wouldn't be a selfish decision. Well, it kind of is, though, isn't it? When you're doing it on your own, it's always going to be somewhat of a selfish decision.
I don't know. There's so many angles to this stuff. It's so weird how this is supposed to map onto things.
Yes,
I mean, it.
I didn't want this to be a selfish decision. It was my dream and my choice to have children.
Yeah. Jesus.
Which
I mean, bro, that's a certified woman moment right there. A big one.
I like that chat is regretting choosing rage.
You get what you fucking deserve, chat. You get what you deserve.
How about another Rage article?
Yeah.
Very- well, I mean, there's something very kind of like sci-fi horror-esque about this entire thing. Particularly, like, okay, scroll back to the picture. Maybe we could take a look at the woman here. 'Cause then she looks like this, and she's 18, and she wants to then use artificial insemination. It's like you would have told me, okay, I went to Denmark to get inseminated at 18. Well, did you have to use the artificial thing? Is the viral all empty over there?
Right.
I mean, you'd imagine that you could find somebody. I think Nordanon posted about this who would be compatible, who would show up for this kind of stuff. But she chose the sterile option. I mean, you could sort of argue that, exactly, Nordanon. You could argue that, okay, maybe you could get like a higher quality sperm from some doctor who's 6'5", with a
Maybe
full head
she'll
of hair.
explain
And,
her reasoning then. Going on.
130 IQ, and it's totally safe and something you don't have to worry about STDs, and everything's been checked and it's done in a lab, and so there's like this demolition man kind of aspect of this where like
Wasn't
it's
there
just
this thing on Twitter a couple of months back about like a girl posting, on behalf of a friend who wanted to find a guy to inseminate her? I remember that being a thing.
yeah.
I hate it because every time something bonkers like that happened, it ends up in your feed no matter what, and you have to like start pressing the not interested thing.
The mute words or something. On there. But they find you, don't they? They always find you. But
I
maybe
don't
you
want to
could read
hear
it
about the girl who doesn't shower getting gangbanged at her birthday. Please. Okay. Let's see here. Paulson says that a stable living situation and secure finances helped make her even more certain that the time to have children was right. Just 5 months after her father's death, Paulson became pregnant with the help of a sperm donor, and last September, Hugo was born. You're still very young. Why wouldn't you want to wait for a partner to have children with? Age does not define how good a mother you are. I didn't want to find a partner just for the purpose of having children.
Yeah.
What?
It's another woman moment.
I'm not. It's not the only point, but it's a big part of it, isn't it?
Yes.
I
we
think
could almost say 50%.
Out of all the reasons to find a partner, I think the having children is probably one of the best. It's probably an S tier, I think, for all the reasons that you
could
have.
anyone. What do you mean it wouldn't be fair? That's literally the contract.
It should not.
This was my dream, and it shouldn't be foisted on anyone else.
Yeah, can't have a man muscle in on her dream. that means she would have to give up half of the dream of Walrus.
Yeah,
she would lose 50% of the dream.
Your wife having a kid, right? Your wife having a kid is such a burden on you, right? God.
Yeah, no,
Why didn't she think
got
about
in the way
your
of
feelings?
all of my
Think
stuff.
of all the Funko Pops you could have bought.
My gaming schedule is just completely off now, and I can't hit my bench press PRs anymore because my sleep has been compromised. So I can't do my morning routine with the sun gazing consistently anymore. So yeah, I'm a wreck from this stuff.
Yeah.
I wish she had thought of that. Yeah. So that.
Consumer is looking at prices of this for this on a website. Apparently, you can get this done for about 8,000 Danish kroner. I'm not sure what the Danish kroner to USD is, but
we just round 1-0, I think
1 to 8 or something like that.
Okay, so let's
very
just
reasonable.
Ballpark it. $800, basically 900. Yeah. Treatment.
Well,
blah, blah, blah.
Might have to add taxes to that as well, but
Sure, fair enough. Yeah, so let's say around $1,000. Let's see here. Blah blah blah. So they interview some woman who's working at one of these fertility clinics, and they ask, "What would you do if an 18-year-old girl came to you and wanted help to have her children of her own?" And she says, "We would take the inquiry seriously and make a serious and thorough assessment. Having said that, we would not immediately get up and start that treatment, but we would rather start by reassuring the person that you have plenty of time to wait and see how life develops," she says. She adds that around 500 single women have received help from Volvatsbjørn in Trondheim and Oslo to have children on their own since the Biotechnology Act was changed in 2020. The treatment is carried out by a number of private clinics, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, this is mostly for 35, 40-year-old women who want to have kids, right?
Well, I think we do have in vitro fertilization programs in Norway in particular, and then that's just when you usually have couples already where there's one of the partners or have an issue,
Yeah,
they would
yeah.
need to have the egg artificially inseminated. But like for these women, so let's say they don't have a problem with their eggs or something, they will just go and get a donor for whatever reason, like they can't find the man that they want to do this with. It's an interesting segment. I will say that it would be like a nice special to maybe take a look at some cases for what kind of person ends up doing this, because it's a bit weird.
Certainly is. Back in Sunderborg in Denmark, Lene Poulsen lives a quiet life with her 6-month-old son. She firmly believes that everyday life has become exclusively better since she became a mother. Many such cases, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Although I have been through difficult things in life, I now have a reason to continue. Hugo is my reason to get up every morning instead of lying in bed feeling sorry for myself. I would do everything for him to have the best day every day. Olsen says that she has never been a typical, quote, party girl. She still has the same close friends as before, and they meet often and they like to go to cafes. Essentially, science has robbed you guys of a trad wife. In the making
Yeah,
here.
it's you're not being cucked by the government, you're being cucked by science this time. It's the tax dollar stuff, but I don't know. I mean, maybe she'll go into financing for this kind of stuff because does she have a job? How does this work exactly? That's what I'm sort of curious about, because it's I mean, if she doesn't have parents, so she can't get her mom to take care of the kid. That's usually what happens when, say,
Right.
like a girl
Yeah.
gets pregnant at maybe between 16 to 18 or something. That it's the
family
grandmother who's
will
going
have
to
to
do
step in. Yeah.
a lot more of the work. But she doesn't even have parents, so she will have to do it all on her own, even without the partner. So, I mean, that's kind of the weird part here. Is that it's you have energy when you're 18 for sure, but it's just kind of there's no pauses. There's no pause button on this kid, right? So it is like a 24-hour, 7 days a week
certainly
job.
is, yeah.
Yeah, poor choice of words there, Nordanon.
Let's see. He's saying I'm feeling the Luddism surging within me. Yes. Let's see here. I take Hugo everywhere. The only difference is that it involves some extra luggage. Session smiles. Do you sometimes feel that you're giving up or missing out on something? Absolutely not. The 19-year-old is looking forward to the future. In the autumn, she will start a 4-year education to become a social worker. Within a few years, she plans to give Hugo another sibling. If I'm without a boyfriend at the time and I want more children, I will do it alone again, she says firmly. She has the following advice for other single women who are considering having children on their own. You must think carefully about this choice because once the child is here, you cannot regret it. At the same time, you should not let your worries get the better of you and prevent you from following your dreams. Most worries will never become a reality anyway. Very inspiring.
Well, okay. I mean, yeah, there's still information left out to be desired in terms of the logistics and the economics of the situation. And maybe she got an inheritance that was decent from if you lose both of your parents and you don't have
that
siblings.
would probably make sense, yeah.
Yeah, there's probably a couple of life insurances in play there as well. So
we found an outlier case, Leo. I mean, we were talking about this Swedish study here, where about lottery winners. I think it's show follower Eddie Bernays on the Twitter timeline. He tagged us in a post where they have the
Longhouse,
Swedish,
strongest soldier.
yeah,
Eddie Bernays on Twitter.
Swedish study about lottery winners, and they see what happens, in relation to family dynamics and fertility. And what they found is that the majority of male lottery winners ended up having more kids after they win the lottery with
and they get
female
married.
ones. The female ones get divorced, and they don't have any more kids. So we just concluded that, from a pro-natalist perspective, it's basically wasting money to give money to women. You should just give it to the men. And then,
I mean, as I said in the chat, the obvious solution here is to forbid women to own money. It also solves, I mean, the housing problems that has been on the current thing these last couple of days on Twitter, because that means that they must stay at home because their father has their money. All the money that goes into her
Right.
hands goes into her father's hands. So she stays at home until she gets a husband, and then it's her husband's money.
And so we're just back to
but
the real fad stuff.
But the deal is also she gets a house out of that. So
And
but Leo, I want
she
my
would
own.
actually own the house as well, right? It was part of like the dowry in many cases, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we can just say we can just revive the old laws and says that a married man can't own properties. He can own land, but he cannot own houses.
Right. Yeah.
Those are the sole possession of his wife. On the other hand, women can't own boats or weapons. So there's that. Or money, as we as we concluded.
There might be some logistical reshuffling needed for that stuff, but I don't know. I'm very open to new solutions, I think.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we can say that, for example, boats can be a placeholder for vehicles, so they can't own cars either. I mean, where are they going anyway?
Very,
They have
very
a
good
house
question.
to take care of.
All right. So let's talk about some NATO stuff for a little bit. We're going to start with this one, which is a message from the NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg, who urges NATO countries to dig even deeper into their pockets for Ukraine. It's all about political will, he says, based and true.
I miss him a little bit now. I think, especially with his kind of like, what do you call it, like cheap knockoff counterpart.
Oh yeah, his protege Störe didn't live up to it. Yeah.
No, Störe, he could never do this. I mean, I thought Stoltenberg was a bit goofy when he was in government, but I kind of look back at it now fondly, as one usually does. But yeah,
rose tinted glasses. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Stoltenberg has always been, the Pentagon's strongest soldier.
He certainly was. The situation
More
is
for the
critical.
forever wars. More.
The situation is critical. The Ukrainians are not about to run out of courage. Sorry, one. Nordan says he's such a stereotypical politician. Well, I'd almost argue that he's a stereotypical politician because he invented that frame in Norway.
I really don't think that he is. I mean, Nordan is younger than us. I don't know how much he remembers of him being in office. I've sort of found him.
I remember quite a lot of him being in office. Yeah.
I mean, he's more of a Tony Blair character, really, to be honest.
Yeah, he doesn't have the appearance for sure, but I think in the actual, he doesn't have the kind of like smooth talking abilities. Tries to be very prim and proper, but like we've talked about, he is actually a bit of an autist. As far as I'm concerned, it's like this sort of.
He's always been sort of willing to play the game quite openly. Like in all interviews, he'll be like, "Oh yeah, I used to believe that the EU was gay and NATO is stupid, but then I realized that if I'm going to get a seat at the table and be a politician and get into power, I'm going to have to join NATO." Right? When he was like 20. And he's always said that in interviews, which I find, if nothing else, at least he's being honest about his drives.
Okay.
I've said this before. Nordanon says his English is quite funny. I've said this before, but I think it is an act. I think he plays it up for the image. because it shouldn't be this bad considering his education
Well,
and
and especially
intelligence.
the amount of time he has spent in international
too.
politics by now. I mean, if he wanted to, he could probably have polished off that accent.
Well,
into
it's
nothingness decades
weird
ago.
because I think it seems like if people do not try to do some speaking when they are young, and they're more kind of bookish, they end up having English that is grammatically correct, but it just sounds extremely off. Like it's just very stiff. Just like
Sure.
if I was going to try to teach myself a sport or something in my 30s, then I could, technically learn it well, but I would just have this kind of stiffness to it that like young athletes don't have. I think it's the same like when you hear people like Stoltenberg and these other guys who have these accents, is that they had to learn it later in life, and it's all like they use the correct words and everything, but it just sounds like weird.
Yeah. That might be it. I just have a feeling that it helps his situation or sort of his image as part of NATO, selling NATO as a coalition, that he doesn't sound very you don't want to sound too generic or too globalist, to be honest. You want to sound like you're from somewhere, that you're representing a part of the NATO apparatus, so to speak, or a member nation. And maybe it's a bit of his brand. I don't know. Yeah, Nordana says. The situation is critical. The Ukrainians are not about to run out of courage, but they're about to run out of ammunition, Stoltenberg warned at a press
And the
conference
bodies.
at NATO headquarters in Brussels. Yes, on this Thursday. Well, today, actually. The message to the members of the alliance is short and sweet. It's short and sweet to dig deeper into their pockets and secure enough weapons and ammunition for the Ukrainians on the battlefield. Historical error. The message is particularly aimed at the United States, which still has not gotten the Ukraine package of $60 billion over the finish line in the Congress. On Wednesday, however, it became known that a small part of the package, about $300 million, will be sent to Ukraine. On Wednesday, it also became known that the EU countries have agreed to allocate 5 billion euros to Ukraine through the European Peace Facility. Is that the true? I don't think that's the... It might be just EPF. I'm not sure if that's the correct translation of the thing. However, half of the expenditure on weapons and equipment that the countries send or have sent directly to Ukraine can be deducted. Nice. We're just going to deduct it. It's just a write-off. It's not like we're sending
aid
physical
in
goods.
the form of giving ourselves a tax break.
Yeah.
Just like my parents in the 90s or something, they try to explain the economics to me. You can just deduct that stuff. Like, don't worry.
It's literally the Seinfeld episode of Kramer starting a
Perfect.
business saying, yeah, you just write it off. Okay. Stoltenberg nevertheless believes that the NATO countries could do even more. NATO allies have both the capacity and the money to secure what they need for Ukraine. This is all about political will, he says. It would be a historic mistake to let Putin win. At the press conference, Stoltenberg represented the annual report for 2023, his last as NATO chief. It shows that NATO countries in Europe and Canada spent an average of 1.8% of their gross domestic product, GDP, on defense last year. Norway is exactly on average for 2023 with 1.8% of GDP, up from 1.5 in 2022. But in 2024, for the first time, the European NATO countries will spend an average of 2% of their GDP on defense. Overall, there are defense investments of around $470 billion, according to Stoltenberg. I hope that the figures will be even better by the summit in July, he says. The top percentage target was adopted in 2014, and in recent years, Stoltenberg has fought hard to reach that target. I've been quite unsure whether I would reach it, he admits to the Associated Press. But the fact that Europe collectively spends 2% on defense is of course due to the fact that we live in a more dangerous world these days, he says. At a press conference, he pointed, among other things, to Norway and the government's announcement this Thursday that they will reach NATO's 2% target already this year. It is very gratifying to hear this, he says to the Associated Press. And then he's talking a bit about the internal politics. Let's see here. And then something about Norway spending a lot of money on defense. Which, do we want to go into that? Or should we move on to other NATO stuff?
No, this is, I mean, it's something that I have mentioned before. Is that in terms of like the absolute sums, then the United States are probably on the top of the contribution list. But if you look at just say like per capita, our favorite word, per capita contributions, then it's the countries that are bordering on Russia that are the highest contributors to the Ukraine conflict currently. And I think Norway is one of the highest ones. Well, we have more money per capita as well, so I don't know if it's related to that. But here we go with the political article. I thought this one was interesting.
Let's see here. So following off of the last one, there's a political article saying Europe starts a war machine to wean itself off of U.S. weapons. I saw someone say, yeah, George, I'm sorry we didn't get to it sooner. I saw your comment earlier about military buildup in Scandinavia. The U.S. is getting a ton of bases here. Quite worrying. Well, they're getting bases, but in terms of personnel, it's still not that much. Europe is still big on buying equipment.
Yeah,
do you have any info on that, Leo?
There's a small misunderstanding there, I think, because this in Scandinavia about the US getting a ton of bases. The Americans are actually not getting any bases in Sweden or Finland. What's happened here is that we have been signing some few deals, and this has been, reported as, oh, it's American getting access to bases and stuff like that. But what it really is about that the American army is allowed to send material for storage on our bases. They are not getting bases, so it's more like they can store, MREs, artillery shells, and stuff like that. So it's more getting access to the logistical network rather than actually getting bases with American personnel on them. And the other part of the thing is because during both for Finland and for Sweden, for a foreign military, even the NATO personnel, to come into the country, that means that the government can't just say yes, because then you have to have a vote on it in the parliament for every single time and instance this happens. So what they have done is that they have kicked it down one pointed ladder, saying that the Department of Defense can say yes to this within a certain amount of restrictions. And then it's like, okay, if you're going to come in for a training exercise, or you want to store some MREs or some rifle ammunition on our bases, fine, that defense department can take on. But if it's going to be something bigger or something outside of that scope, it still has to go to the parliament to okay it. So I think there's a lot of things being lost in translation here, and people just go like, oh, the empire's coming in, but again, nothing ever happens is the reigning champion, because nothing is happening.
Well, let's not forget, I mean, both Norway and as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Leo, on certain parts of just military equipment, we're producing quite a lot of weapons or ammo already. It's just that we're exporting a lot of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, we do
not like jet fighters and tanks, but certainly ammunition.
APCs. I mean, we produce Sweden produces.
Oh, the Swedes produce APCs.
More
cool.
APCs, like the CV90, with the 40mm guns. The ones that doesn't explode like Pop-Tarts. The Bradleys that the Americans are making.
Right.
And we also do a lot of But then again, I think it's more like mostly Sweden who has a military production infrastructure. I mean, what is it now? What is it? We're producing around between 300 and 400,000 on 155mm grenades a year at current capacity. So And what's the total European production currently? It's like 600,000-700,000 grenades per year at current capacity. So the Scandinavian complex, if you will, because these are in turn supplied by some by production in Finland mostly. So
Right.
we have the Finnish, Swedish, and there's some Norwegian components coming into this as well. So you can say the Pan-Scandinavian armory is producing most ammunition, both for rifles, mortars, artillery grenades. We don't produce heavy, main battle tanks, but we do produce the best APCs. And a lot of the Taurus missiles that the Germans have, they're mostly produced by Saab.
Oh,
And,
really?
yeah.
Nice. Carl Habermas
It's
says,
it's a joint venture between the Germans and us. So
yeah. Carl Habermas says, is there any EU country that could sustain an independent, large-standing army, or is building towards this? I feel like in brackets there as well, you're saying that could, stand against Russia. And I suppose, the short answer is no, but I guess the long answer is that, well, the European countries, or at least, in theory, the Scandinavian or a lot of the NATO countries, would be interested in, having a coalition.
I think, Finland has a pretty large standing army. Of course, they're like super tiny compared to Russia because of previous history with the Soviets, the Winter Wars and appeasement and so on. They've sort of been a lot more vigilant on that front, right? So I think they're more prepared than
as Poland as well, which is a good.
Yeah,
it's a good.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been more hawkish.
I mean, Poland is also okay. They have numbers, but that's also all the Poles that they have, because the Polish army is just a fucking mess. I mean, it's a logistical nightmare. They are currently operating 9 types of main battle tank. I mean, they have American, German, French, British. They have, this is like, what happens when a Polish plumber wins the fucking Powerball. He just buys everything that he can buy, and it's not fit for purpose. I mean, they just have stuff. They can't really. Well, perhaps if you don't need to drive in them anyway, you can just wait for an aggressor than the Russians to roll into Poland. Then you can do it. But if you're going to go on the offensive, you're just fucked, because you don't have a logistical chain that works. It's just going to be like, oh, we have these parts and this ammunition. Oh well, yeah, that doesn't work with the armored vehicles and the weapons that we have in this brigade. You want to go with those to like 2 brigades over down south. They can use that, and you start getting into that sort of problem when you start mixing and matching like the Poles have done. It's just retardation. So it looks good on paper, but in practicality, it's just disaster.
Peregrinus de Flandria for €2 says, how fucked are we if France sends troops?
France is not going to send troops. This is like, you have to understand that this is more of a internal French political thing. It's posturing for the domestic crowds, or for the domestic consumers in France, because the Macron has problems domestically. Let's just put it like that.
To put it lightly,
and everyone knows it. It's just it's just hot air, and everyone else has gone like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. Fuck that shit. So, not really.
Let's see here. I'm Do you have anything to comment on, Ludwig Path, or do you want me to
Well,
just
yeah, I don't
start
know. It's
reading?
very difficult for me. I'm a lot more fresh on geopolitics than a lot of people. I'm not really to the point where I could say that. Let's say France hypothetically sends in soldiers. Here's like 10 different scenarios that's going to play out, or
I'm unfortunately
anything
not an
like that.
armchair general
I'm just
myself either.
no. I'm just I'm getting the like I mean, Leo Borealis said it could just be like standard French posturing. There's a lot of stuff about France that I don't understand, but I'm just getting the impression, especially lately, because Macron has been sort of in the news, but he's coming off to me as like he's slightly more proactive about a lot of these things, so at least in theory, than some of these other European leaders. And I don't know if that's because he's younger or whatever, but he's
Nordanon says, you mean that based Macron isn't going to declare the based Pan-Europa Empire?
well, I mean that's what I mean with I don't know what's going to come of that, but he's the guy who's talking about the European super state, right? And saying that we need to basically try to decouple Europe from the US. I mean, you can say what you want, but there is a sort of idealism there in terms of like trying to be proactive with, okay, what happens now if you decouple from the United States partnership in a sense.
But Ludwig, I thought you were Klaus Schwab's strongest soldier.
Yeah, no, I've changed my duvet covers again from Trump's to Schwab, and now I have Macron pillow casing.
Now it's the
in my room.
EU flag. Yeah.
Now it's the EU stuff. I don't know if the WEF have if the WEF have their own army, then it's over, right?
That's
they
true.
have like a secret army that they're gonna roll out to.
But I mean, how many times have the US basically blocked the EU from creating their own standing army? Right?
Like every time it actually comes up for discussion.
Exactly. And it's been I remember reading about that like years and years ago. So they've tried doing that a lot of times.
I mean, they did
right?
it like the first time during the 90s.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean the total European, army spending and actual army recruitment has just gone very, very far down. But if there's a change in tone internally in the US, as there does seem to be some hints toward, then people have to think differently, right? I mean, and I don't know what people want, if they want to go back to Westphalian conditions in Europe where they want some kind of like pan-European super state, but regardless, like the military spending has to go up by quite a bit. Yeah. There's just no choice. And of course that will affect people's living standards and these other things.
And
yes, perfect.
Let's see here. The European Union is no longer just a peace project. On Tuesday, the European Commission presented a European defense industrial strategy alongside a subsidy cash pot of at least £1.5 billion. Called it. This is less than they gave to Ukraine, by the way. But I mean, maybe they can't write this off. So it was called the European Defense Investment
actual
Program.
Money.
Yeah, this is actual money. Thierry Breton, the industry commissioner, underlined during the presentation of the strategy that Europe is facing an quote-unquote existential threat, while foreign policy chief Joseph Borrell warned, quote, in response to Russia's aggression against Ukraine, the EU must bolster its defense capabilities. If the member countries agree, it will mark the end of the post-Cold War peace dividend that saw military spending shrivel. Quote, the strategy is not an answer to the war in Ukraine, but rather a broader response to a strategic paradigm shift. It's a recognition that defense is a subject that's not going to go away for a while, said Camille Grand, a former NATO Assistant Secretary General, now a distinguished policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. So this is kind of what we're saying here, is that, the EU has sort of been thinking about this for a while. And every time, something happens in Europe like this with Ukraine, or it becomes more clear that maybe the US is on a downward slope compared to something like China, we're going to have to basically increase our defense spending. I think that's just a fact of life, right?
Yeah, no, but I like with Macron, I get the impression that sort of he wasn't really in with, or didn't really consider China to be an issue. In a sense, he said that he wanted to continue to have trade relations with China in spite of
Yeah,
like
no,
Trump's.
I just mean in the sense of the moving to what people call the multipolar world.
Oh yeah. I see what you
Essentially
mean.
means
At
that
least,
we're going to have to increase spending either as you said, either as like a Westphalian thing or as a pan-European sort of thing.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I just see this as a good idea, though. I mean,
Very what?
perhaps not for Germans because they don't have any heavy industry left. It's just, but we have, and we are, we're building more factories for our heavy and especially the arms industry. So, and I have a lot of defense stocks. So, come and buy, come and buy.
I don't know. We have to. I mean, we have like 150 years or whatever of extracting lithium battery phosphates. So I'd like to keep the wars away for another 150 years, so we can keep earning money off of resources we found in the ground.
Yeah, but for anyone, I mean, the big problem for you are the Americans because they
That's
are already
true.
there.
Yep.
But for the Russians to be a problem, really, they have to go through Finland and us before they come
Yeah,
to
I
you.
mean,
So,
compared to you guys, we're a bit more safe.
yeah, but the thing is also as people start questioning about the Russians. But I like to point out like the war plans for Europe, for the Soviet Union, did for a reason have the idea that we're just going to drop a fat one on Copenhagen, and then we're just gonna bypass the entire Scandinavian peninsula because it's just not fucking worth it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, what's the point, really?
Yeah, I mean the thing is that sure there are some strategic, but you can just bypass it, strike at, take out the air bases on Iceland, and just go around it towards Scotland to fuck with the English.
I mean, they will have to
So-
deal with your air bases, right? Don't you have like a bajillion of them hiding in the forests?
Yeah, we call them roads.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
no,
you
but the thing
you actually did smart stuff with that, unlike us who just ran to Daddy US and be like and told them to help us.
well, you did get porn out of it, so
Yeah.
yeah, at
Good
gunpoint
trade. Yeah.
for our American viewers who doesn't know this. One of the things that Norway had to do to get Marshall Plan aid was to give up the ban on porn.
Yep.
That was one one thing that the Americans.
This is
would
part of
not.
why it was so heavily discussed when it was political. We covered this.
I think we
must
did
have
an
been in our first
episode.
episode.
I don't
Yeah.
remember the explicit kind of like rules around pornography. I remember that they imported porn from the United States. I mean, of course, this is not like hardcore stuff, but you're looking at the more sort of primitive Playboy, centerfold magazines and such.
The idea was basically to allow Americanisms to enter the culture, essentially.
Yeah, but then again, going back to that that former idea there about this is the problem when you start viewing like Poland has this many men, and Italy has this many men, and Germany has this many, and Finland has this many. It doesn't really matter how many men you have when you live on a fucking plane.
Yeah.
The reason that the Russians after the Second World War never wanted to go into Scandinavia again is because of the terrain. It is
exactly
extremely easy to bottleneck and hold up a numerically larger force. On the Central European plain, you can just move them a little there. There are gentle hills, a couple of easily fordable rivers, some forests, nothing too tough. Once you get into Karelia
and
Finland,
regardless of
it's just rocks and big fucking pines everywhere. Once you go off the road, you will get 5 meters, and your tank will be have thrown like all the tracks it has. It's going to be wedged between like a large, 50-ton rock, one of those, ice floating rocks, the big ones that are round, three
Yep.
pines, and it's gonna be stuck until you get a recovery vehicle in there to drag you out.
I mean that
And
happens to our own stuff as well. So
yeah, I mean,
that's not
it's not like
anything
our
new.
no, I mean, it's not like our tanks and APCs can handle the terrain anything better. I mean, there's a reason why Finland, Norway, and Sweden go so heavily into the Ranger formations compared to, say, the Rangers per army personnel. I mean, in one of the larger, like the French army or the American army, the amount of regular infantry you have on a ranger or ranger adjacent kind of trained soldier is much lower than it's in the Scandinavian countries, and that's really because of the terrain. You want to have highly trained hit and run people that can just go, oh, you're not going anywhere. Oh, we got the car started. And they shot out the tires. Yeah, we're not going anywhere.
Right.
So that's a lot of the strategy is really just to block, fall back a little, and when they come out again, block, counterattack a little, not too much, and then fall back again. Just bleed them dry.
Peregrinus de Flandria says for £2, global warming is a Scandi security threat. That's actually an interesting argument. We have
Not really,
be,
because that means that the bogs won't freeze in winter.
that's true.
That was how
Yeah.
how the Russians managed to force the Ishmuts in the continuation war, because it was so fucking cold that winter.
Yeah.
So the pit bogs froze, so they could drive tanks over them, and that's when they kind of managed to push the Finns out of their positions. Before that, they just couldn't get anywhere.
God, it's the worst. Yeah. I can imagine. Okay, I'm gonna read some more here. The aim is to get the EU, the world's second largest economy, to finally begin punching its weight when it comes to defense. It's an idea that's swirled around the EU since its creation as the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951. The plan for European Defense Union was born in the mind of one of the Europe's founding fathers, Francis Jean Monnet, and was ironically killed when French lawmakers refused to ratify the treaty in 1954. Now another Frenchman, European Commissioner for Internal Market, Thierry Breton, will take the lead in presenting the EU's executive defense plans. Instead of forming a multinational fighting force, something that was considered in the early years of the Cold War, this time it's all about building up the bloc's military-industrial complex, as well as decreasing Europe's reliance on American weapons. Especially acute fear as Donald Trump rises in the polls ahead of this year's U.S. election.
Ah, the Donald rises.
The Donald rises. That's such a strange thing to have to consider, is that Donald Trump winning the American election, right, could decrease American spending in EU, which leads to a more independent Europe, which is good for Russia, right? In a weird sense.
Yeah. But then again, I don't know. I don't think long term, but that's probably a different discussion. If you're just looking out of the defense side, it has some interesting short term impacts. But
Sure.
The long term, as we have previously discussed, I mean the long term effects of a Donald win.
Yeah.
Well, that's more or less a disaster, because that's just probably going to let the PayPal mafia come in and shore up the empire, and it's going to be 30-40 years more of the declining empire.
I was going to say, I think I sent you the message, Ledig Path, on Telegram, that sort of the the broke take is that the Russians colluded to get Donald to win because they want to control America, and like the Giga Brain take is no, they just want to destroy America, but they're still colluding.
Well, I mean, it's. I don't think it's really. There's been a lot of back and forth with these political alignments when you look at the Republican and Democratic side in the U.S. But I feel like now it's kind of not. It's become something that is logically coherent, and I mean, you can say pretty safely that a lot of Russian interest would align better with American populist interest the way things are now. The populist American sentiments towards Ukraine is that Ukraine is a punchline for them, more or less. I mean, whether you look at the Twitter timeline or YouTube influencer content, that's kind of how they approach it. And I think it's the same thing it's reflected in Donald Trump. I feel like he, in the beginning, there was a lot of, things going in different directions in terms of who wants what, but it seems to have fallen very nicely into place where, most of the Americans don't consider it immediate. It's just kind of a foreign conflict that's just over there that they don't give a shit about fundamentally, like it would be Azerbaijan or Afghanistan or really the Middle East or anything else. I think they're probably more interested in the Middle East, actually. If you talk about the populist base and so-called Red America, some of them, because of their kind of fundamentalist Christian Zionism, are actually more interested in Israel than they are in Europe. And I mean, that's just kind of what you get with if you have like a Red American president. Fundamentally, is that the interest for European affairs, it's non-existent, really. It's just considered kind of stupid, and that goes both ways. But if you live in Europe, then like these things that are happening is becoming a lot more immediate, and seems to have other repercussions. So that's just kind of how it is, and we've been talking about this a lot, actually. This sort of divergence in interests to the point where, I don't know where I'm even going with this at this point, but
no, I think it's just interesting times ahead, in terms of what what will be on the other end of the decade, I suppose, both in terms of where people are politically, but also
I
just
feel like a lot of people
geographically, like how are the online right going to be able to survive the coming years united? I don't think that's going to be possible. I think the split between the EU and the US is going to become very, very clear.
In a weird way, I think like everybody got what they wanted, but I don't think they really understood the implications of what that was, if that makes any sense.
I can see that.
I mean, like the European EU has grown a lot in anti-American sentiment over time, and I think the
it can't
American
sort of shake the feeling that we, as in us, you and me and Leo, are gonna lose here no matter what. And Henrik in the chat kind of says as well, like the increased army in Europe is going to be used to put down like right-wing populism.
Well, yeah, I mean, but of course that could also be the base for right-wing populism in Europe.
That's true as well.
I mean, if you have actual significant spending on the army, more people in the army, you create the more martial culture from that, and that could also be it creates other opportunities. So I think a lot of people get what they wanted with this, but there's I mean, it's something I talked about in the chat as well, that there is a kind of in my view, this is a kind of weird contradiction with the people who are in these dissident spheres, who are considered right wing, is that they want the nationalism and they want the protectionism and these kind of like stronger bonds, but they are completely repulsed by the idea of conflict, or at least armed conflict in terms of war, military escapades. Like really, they just have this kind of complete knee-jerk kind of backlash reaction to anything that has to do with this. And if you ask them what they want, well, it's kind of, they want just like higher living standard, which is something they often will balk at. I just see this as being very contradictory. They talk about, well, the elites don't care about us. Like they don't want to, I'm paying more for electricity and people can't afford food and they can't do this or that. But then again, they'll talk about how Evola says that, like, well, you're living in the Kali Yuga, and everybody only is concerned about material goods and so on. And so I don't know how this is exactly supposed to be resolved for these people. I feel like they've kind of put themselves in a bit of
I don't know.
I don't know what you call it, a little bit of a corner there. There seems to be
Yeah,
no
I don't really
logical
get it. I
resolution
mean,
to it.
I don't think I don't
I
think
think
there
it's
are.
I think it's a fair. It's it's kind of a wanting the cake and eating it at the same time, because you want all the things that comes out of as you say, military adventurism and less less welfare from the government, but they really want the other effects of it, with a strong nationalistic or a pop what do you call it,
I
a
just think
fraternal sense or something like that.
I just think that you mentioned the Kali Yuga and all that stuff, and I've just been thinking that it's very hard to come up with sort of Spenglerian solutions for immediate problems, right? At least in the current, without having like a time span of, let's say, like 30 to 50 years, which means that you're going to have to figure out how you're going to, still be around in 30 to 50 years. And that's something you'll have to figure out before you start thinking about what's going to happen then.
I think Spengler is very fascinating, but there are no Spenglerian solutions in a sense as a politician or as a person.
Well, that's what I mean.
It
There are no
becomes almost a
Spenglerian
little bit.
solutions to immediate problems, right?
No, you don't
Yeah.
sit and plan. I mean, I was very fascinated by it when I was introduced to the material, but I've listened to more of these podcasts recently where people are sitting and planning for the Caesar. It's becoming a little bit cringe at this point, honestly.
It's
Like,
silly.
oh, who's gonna be the Caesar? You see, his Caesar is not a concrete person. It's something within our hearts and minds that we can build with the merchant Caesar out of Transformers, and then that's gonna be multi Caesar. And shut the hell up, honestly. Like, this is just so dumb.
It actually turns out that the Red Caesar was the bros that we found along the way.
Yeah, actually the artificial intelligence was the Red Caesar the whole time, and
Yeah.
it was the Northern Lights or something. I mean, I'm sorry. This is just not very constructive.
No, I think the most constructive thing to do here would really be, for us to increase our spending to like 4% of GDP, wait 5 years, and then secure our resource needs by invading Norway and taking all their shit.
Yep.
Well, damn! I was hoping for, like, we could remake the Kalmar Union or something.
Oh, that would be something.
Apparently,
How do you think the Kalmar
At this
Union
point, I would
invade?
at this point I would almost unironically be more up for that. We
I
can
mean,
learn to work together, sweet bros. It's fine. Carl Habermas for £2 says, I think people would fight for nationalist elites. I think a lot of people would fight for nationalist elites. I absolutely think that in the EU they would. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, I think some people would be very on board with that, but some of them are already on board with fighting for, like, the current
Israel.
system, because that's where you're getting the having your cake and eating it too. That with some of the people that are more radical, I've expressed this before in my very unpopular talks about conscription, but that a lot of these people are just not really sincere about actually making big sacrifices when it comes down to something that's going to affect them personally on any bigger level, and that they will sit and complain about consumerism and capitalism and, like, the nihilism that comes with consumer culture, but ultimately what they want from their politicians is just, like, more money, more money for them programs.
It's just different programs, man.
Yeah, but the cool programs though, not the
the base
more,
ones,
based Viking village programs.
All right, we're about an hour and 30 into this. I'm sorry we spent so much on rage stuff. Should I keep reading a bit, or should we save more of this for another time?
I don't know. I think we could save more of it for another time. There's some good discussions to be had
on here as well. He can
Yeah,
have some.
I wanted to. We could just
insights.
end up just look. I wanted to look at the Baltic Seas, right? Just in terms of just for speculation, because you can't have
Want me to
geopolitics
pull up,
without looking at maps. think they have the guy with the
Go.
guitar, right?
The guy with the guitar.
Isn't that what you're saying? I always thought, the silhouette there
Guitar?
between Sweden and Finland is the guy. It's a man there and he's standing and holding a
Oh,
guitar.
yeah, I can see it. Yeah, I see it. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Now you can't unsee it.
Oh, I can't unsee it. Yeah.
But I mean, here's the sort of.
Yeah, I can see it.
This would be the
neck
state
of the guitar. Here's the. Yeah, I see it.
The state of play as to like, okay, what's it going to be in, like, to say the next 3 to 4 years, because that's where a lot of people are bracing themselves. Like, I had another article there from, I think, the Prime Minister of Estonia. A lot of those countries are sort of bracing themselves for impact, and like, regardless of what you think of Russian intentions, I think they would be almost a little bit silly if they didn't do that, given the current situation. But of course, I mean, we've gone on for quite a long time. I think we might want to just round off, unless we have some more questions or some other fresh takes, and we could bring Burkhard on, Berkey Burke and the Funky Bunch, to
Leo
talk about
Borealis,
things
anything
from the
you would like
Finnish
to add here
perspective.
at the end?
No, not really. I think we can take it the next time and do a more deep dive on the conscription and the, as we said, the military buildup in Scandinavia, and
That would be
look
very
at it a
interesting.
little bit more detail, and take in Berkard for the Finnish takes.
That would be great. So, Luddic Path, anything you want to shill before we head out of here?
Yeah, read praxarchy.com.
And Leo Borealis?
Well, as everyone knows, I have a schizo Twitter account that you may want or may not want to follow. Probably not, so don't.
It's important to remember that Luddic Path
already.
also has his Twitter account, where you can read about his hatred of Indians and how Klaus Schwab is going to save us all. Is that a correct summary?
Well, that's the interesting thing that you can probably read on Luddic Path's timeline. Will Klaus Schwab save Europe from the Pageets?
Yeah, that's. I mean, I've put all my eggs in the basket of the white supremacist World Economic Forum stopping third world migration. I think that's the best solution so far. And when the fight comes between the PayPal mafia and the WEF, I will be Team WEF all the way.
Otherwise we're going to have to hunt for like she-male penises in the media ad nauseum, right?
Yeah, we will be I mean, if you think being colonized by Blue America is bad, just wait until you get colonized by Red America, and you just get like Southern hip hop and tranny news all over. That's the
rapping
about
trucks
their favorite
and girl
preoccupied with the
talks.
tranny question.
They love dicks, basically. That's kind of what they're interested in. There was like this photo, I think it was of some kind of maybe the Vietnamese military or something, where they're doing like this kind of penile checks, and the conscripts are standing in their boxer shorts, and like the officers just going and checking their gear, one by one. And I think that
Penis
this is like
inspection.
the kind of the MAGA-pede media consumption. This is sort of okay. We'll go to Hunter Biden, and we'll just touch his bulge, and then Michelle Obama's bulge, and we got Brigitte Macron's bulge, and then we'll just keep.
And Chuck Schumer's wives I saw also as well today on Twitter. So it's just going out of fucking control.
Yeah, it's rent free. Well,
Nordalen asks, "What the fuck are we off about?"
Well,
is it Candace Owens and what's the outlet? It's
Daily Wire, I think.
Daily Wire, yeah.
I made the tweet there, but like Candace Owens is now running with the story that Emmanuel Macron's wife is actually transvestite, right? So she's a man. Really, and like this seems to be a very sort of preoccupation with the American, like Red America MAGA peds, that they're interested in genitalia, whether it's like posting pictures of Hunter Biden's dick until Biden is until Biden, what do you call it? He's what's the word
Ousted
they
from
use?
the office.
Yeah, they always ousted, or they wanted to do Michelle Obama's stick, and now it's like Emmanuel Macron's wife. I mean, she spends like 20 minutes reading over this research
Seems
site
very
that is
possible.
this unsecured unsecured HTML site that just
It
goes
makes me
on and on.
think that
Yeah.
almost as like an art project, you could like make this shitty website and do some photo manipulation and sort of get featured on the Daily Wire.
Yeah, I think it doesn't seem that difficult to get boomers to just make shit up and just get American boomers to believe it like it's a religion. That seems to be the way to go there.
Yeah,
And
I
the
mean,
more
what was
outlandish, the
the
better.
latest thing from the MAGA boomers now that they had this, they had this kind of guys. I think I'm onto something. The Democrats are importing a shitload of Mexicans to replace the blacks. It's like, well, you're so fucking close, but no dice. No dice. It's like, I mean, this is happening straight in front of me. It was like, what was it? 12 million people this last year has come into Texas or something ridiculous. And they're just like, I got it. They're trying to replace the basketball people. What? What the fuck is this?
Carl says, I couldn't believe she said she'd stake her entire professional career on the implications of Macron's wife's bulge. Is this real?
Yeah, she did.
She said,
Yeah.
she said those
I haven't
words.
heard it, but I heard that AA had looked into it and he said,
Oh,
yeah,
Jesus
that
Christ.
happened. It's so fucking retarded. Oh, Jesus.
The great Regizzle.
So that I mean, I did say that like with Vivek Ramaswamy, it's just a question of time before he starts talking about Michelle Obama's bulge as a talking point, and like it wasn't him who broke that barrier, but now we're there, like with the American counter elites, whether it's like Tucker or Candace Owens or these people, we're basically at the Michelle Obama bulge level. So it'll be exciting to see where they go from here. I don't know how low they can get, but they keep surprising.
Yeah.
All right.
Someone always comes around with a shovel,
On that note, I think it's time we end the episode for this week. Thank you, everyone, for listening or for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. We'll try to get a bit of a deep dive into sort of the conscription, more some NATO stuff, get Burkle on here as well to get a bit more technical, alongside, of course, Leo Borealis. We'll see what happens. And until then, we wish you a pleasant weekend and a good evening. Let me see here the outro. Goodbye, everyone.